Greetings, Kerbinauts! This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is a special, one-time only, new module launch in a relatively stock Kerbal Space Program, version 1.22, going to a, well, it's sort of like the International YouTube Space Station, although it's not technically called that. We're calling it the Collaborative Station. But it's the same idea. It's a bunch of YouTubers getting together, each putting one module on the station, taking turns transporting that save game file in between ourselves. And I happen to be somewhere around in the middle as far as I can tell, but I don't really know exactly which order I'm in. Everybody's done their own little bit and then passed it off to the next person. And so I can see the result of everybody else's effort. I can see that there's something going on over at Eve. I'm not sure what. We have a station around the moon here. So yeah, everybody's done a bunch of little things so far. Well, several people have. And now it's my turn to add to it. And I was taking a look at the station orbiting around the moon, thinking, where am I going to dock my module? Just sort of planning ahead and thinking, you know what this thing needs? It needs lights. More lights. That's what's missing. And so today we are launching a module that is bringing over all the wonderful illumination that this station is going to need.
Critical functions. T-minus 17 seconds. 15. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, start, 2, 1, boost ignition, and liftoff. Returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
And there you have it. There's our payload. There are two modules there, actually. Well, sort of. There's one that's a lander. We're going to land that on the moon because we can't be satisfied with the number of lights that we're bringing up there to the station. We might want more. And if we want more, and we don't want to have to bring them from Kerbin every single time, we're going to have a factory to produce them. So that's what that is. That lander at the very top is able to extract ore from the surface to create fuel, oxidizer, and take the excess ore and other surface minerals and whatnot and convert those into new lights. So yeah, that is a light factory, and we'll be putting that down near the highest concentration of good light factory making materials right after we dock the module below it to the station. That is a central light control switchboard in there. You can see it has the 3 lights on already, actually. Some of you might look at that and think science lab. No. That is the control center. Hundreds of light switches will control the lights all over the station. And also being brought up with there's a cargo bay, and it is filled with lights, and those can be put out on the station, attached using Kerbal inventory and Kerbal attachment system. So there you go, that's what this mission is all about. We're going to bring up a lander to produce lights, we're going to dock a station that controls the lights, and we're going to attach lights. Because you gotta have more lights. I'm doing all of this not just because I love to light things up and make them pretty in KSP, but also because, look at this, check this out. This is what the station looked like when I took a look at it as it was moving through the dark side of the moon. Here, well before we had launched, before my module and the lights are gonna get up there and be attached. So you can see, it clearly needs a little extra illumination. We're departing Kerbin now. The departure stage is still attached because we're going to be using that to capture our orbit and rendezvous with that space station that everybody else has created. Now, to give you an idea of how this is going to go, take a look at this. Now, let's say this is the moon, sitting here in our nice little star field. And suppose we have this space station orbiting around. Now, what I'd like to do is get the path as I'm flying by the moon before I've captured an orbit to pass right over the orbit of the station. That should be very easy to do because we'll be moving so slow when we first enter the sphere of influence of the moon that we'll be able to adjust our orbit to go right past the orbit of the station there. Then when we reach our periapsis, just as we're crossing over the orbit of the station, we're going to do our capture burn. We'll also adjust our inclination to line ourselves up if necessary. Once we've captured our orbit though, we're not going to stop there. We're going to keep lowering it down, not all the way down, but just until we get an intercept where a close approach of the station is matching up with our pass-by. What we'll find is that as we lower our orbit, our apoapsis orbit, closer and closer to the moon, we're going to start seeing close approaches going by one after the other until eventually the close approach indicator is going to slow down quite a bit. And when that happens, we know that we're getting close to about the last one that we're going to be able to match. So from there, we'll go up to our apoapsis for the very first time, and then as we swing around and come through the periapsis the second time, after having reached the moon, we're going to be intercepting the station because the close approach will say that we're meeting up. So that's the plan. Let's see how well we do. Ah, there we go. You can see we have done our capture. We're moving up toward the apoapsis, but before we get there, I figure I might as well check right now to see if I can adjust my maneuver and get those little orange markers closer together. I'm doing it here because it's pretty much the exact opposite side away on the orbit away from those markers. Doing it from the apoapsis could be just as good, but I might want to adjust more than one time. So we'll do it here, and if I don't like what I get, I'll do it again. And I'll just make tiny adjustments until it's just right. I have one solar panel out because I noticed as I was approaching the moon that our electrical charge had run down to 0, and I figured by the time we come out from the other side of the dark here, we'll be able to pick up some electricity if I have that open. So that's why it's open, but we'll be bringing that in again when we do our landing later. Alright, you can see the station sliding by down there a little bit below me. We have arrived. Now you're going to see me after I decouple the lander. We can't dock with the lander still attached. You're going to see me alt-clicking on the ships in order to toggle between them, to switch between them. It's a mod called Easy Vessel Switch. You hold down Alt and you left-click on a ship and it just selects that one and you start controlling it. It's way easier than using those brackets to toggle between your ships. Very useful mod. I use it to go back and forth when I'm on EVA too. I can click on the Kerbal and then go back to the space station that I'm flying around with my Kerbal and back and forth like that. Super easy. It's especially helpful when you have a bunch of debris or launch stages, bits of fairing, or whatever you might have floating around. It's really easy to navigate that way. This is in fact an example right here. I've released my upper stage there that I used to get here, but I don't need it anymore. So that is going to go in deorbit to be destroyed on the surface of the moon. Well, that was originally the plan, but don't tell the other YouTubers I forgot to do that, so it's still orbiting. Anyway, sit back, relax, and watch the docking of the module. Alright, there we go. Now Bob Kerman, who represents me as the YouTuber who's doing this particular part, still needs to EVA on over to the station and do the light assembly before coming back to the lander and setting it down on the surface of the moon to begin light production. And I will show you that, but I'm going to come back to it after I get to show you the landing. This technically happened after all the EVA construction, but I'm just going to break up the scene a little by showing you that before we go back to the station itself. We'll cap off the episode with what is the awesomeness of the station. I used my multi-maneuver node technique of zeroing in on exactly the spot that I want to be. It's where the highest concentration of minerals are that are really good for making lights. And then we came in for our landing. What an amazing landing! How awesome was that? Yeah, well, I would love to tell you that that's how it went, but that's not actually how it went. Let me show you the real landing. First, I'll start off by not just glossing over the multi-maneuver node technique here. I'll show you what I did there. I set up a maneuver so that the end of the maneuver node would be around the location where it intersects the surface where I wanted to land. Then I move a little bit forward, do that maneuver, or at least some portion of it. I just tried to get the end of my orbit, my real orbit, not the maneuver node. The maneuver node is irrelevant. I want to look at the real end of the orbit. The maneuver node is more like a guideline. That's why I delete it either before or during the actual maneuver, because at that point I don't need it anymore. So I do a little bit of a burn, keeping the end of the orbit on the location where I want to be. Then moving forward on the orbit, I set another maneuver. Once again, the end of the maneuver is trying to be where I want to land, but by being further ahead on the orbit, it means I have to do some retro burn in order to do that. Usually pull up a little radial in order to keep the apoapsis where the maneuver is. Repeating that 3, 4, even 5 times until we're close enough that we can do the landing by eye. Now, if I really wanted to, I could just land straight at the target by eyeballing it, but this is a lot safer. It's kind of a lazy way of doing it, but it gets the job done, and it's so easy to do it this way. I don't have to worry about missing my target or anything like that. It'll always bring me down in the spot where I want it for relatively the minimum amount of delta V that I need to spend, and ultimately just lets me save time. So we do that, and like I said, as we get closer, then we just start to eyeball it. I can see the spot where I want to land now. You can see it right there. Tiny little speck will zoom in. That's one of the few landing spots on the entire moon that has the greatest concentration of light-making ores. Many people like to call those moon arches, but little do you know that's just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. That's a little bit of a huge deposit under the surface. This little bit of it is sticking up out of the surface, but down below is a treasure trove of material. I'm just barely overshooting the arch a little bit. That was sort of on purpose. I wasn't entirely sure where I was going to want to land. I was thinking I wouldn't land directly under it, and then as I was coming down, I started realizing that there was a bit of a slope here, and I thought, oh, maybe I do want to land closer to the arch. I'll just find a nice flat surface. And so we started flying closer to it. I powered up the engine some more so that we could basically hover. I started gliding back toward the arch and thought, how about here? No, this one looks a little bit too sloped. Let's go closer still. And once again, fire up and get closer, and then slow down and think, ooh, how about here? And I think I did that 3 or 4 times before I finally picked out the place where I was going to really bring it down. In the end, I decided on basically being right next to the arch. I should have just decided to do that from the very beginning. And after all of that, thinking, oh, try not to land on a slope. Yep, I get here and I land on a slope. Oh, don't worry, this was all part of the plan, Bob Kerman says. I know how to solve this. I'm just showing off. If I bring in my landing legs and I use my RCS, I can tip myself back up to normal. Yeah, that didn't work. So then we thought, oh, well, how about if we flip around and go the other direction and fire up the engine? Maybe that will, by going up the slope back toward the arch and then firing the RCS at the same time, that could lift the nose. But all that did was get us going fast enough that I was afraid we were going to blow something up. So I throttle back down and give it another try, kind of scooting along the surface here quite a bit. I guess if nothing else, we're going to end up exactly where I probably should have landed from the very beginning. Oh, and sure enough, there we go. Something has blown up. Hopefully it wasn't something we needed. I see a solar panel on the side, so I know it wasn't that. Maybe it was the other solar panel. But then suddenly I get the idea. Wait, the solar panel. If I flip myself over onto the same side with the panel pointing down that I can see is still there. Oh, and there's the other one. The other one is fine too. I can open up the panel and that will pop me straight up. And then if I just open up the legs, bam! There we go. Nailed it! I can see here now that we're all lined up properly that what blew up was the very top. It had a communications dish on it that we were going to use to send signals back to Kerbin, but we can communicate with the station when it passes over. We have a backup antenna, so we're okay. Now, having extended our drills, we can begin bringing in the minerals that we're going to need to create the liquid fuel, the oxidizer, and the lights. Because you gotta have more lights, and once we've constructed enough of them, we can lift off using the fuel we've converted and go up and rendezvous with the station and bring them more lights. And so that's going to do it down here. We should go and take a look at what it was like when we were actually installing the lights just before this landing. Bob had already decoupled the lander from the module that was being installed, so he had to EVA his way over to the station. That was simple enough. The problem was really just a usability thing from my point of view. The ship is already 500 parts and multiple docked segments. And I know from doing my ISS series that means you're going to get a little bit of a slowdown. And sure enough, I was getting quite a bit of slowdown. So when I got to the station, I opened up the cargo bay that contains all the lights and I started trying to grab them with Kerbal Attachment System, and I ran into one of the two major problems that I was going to have in this. I couldn't figure out how to actually carry the lights from the cargo bay to the locations where I wanted them attached, and you couple that with not being able to maneuver very fast. This whole thing that you're watching here is sped up 8 to 10 times normal because the frame rate was kind of low. Anyway, I grabbed one of the lights out of the cargo bay and I started trying to figure out how to get it moved further down the station. I knew in the back, somewhere in the back area of the station, I wanted to have some more illumination there. I thought that the way that this is supposed to work, and I must admit, I haven't really played with the latest version of Kerbal Attachment, Kerbal Inventory System, so I don't really know, and maybe I should have researched it more. Maybe what I'm trying to do isn't even possible. I'm going to look into it. I thought I was supposed to be able to put the light into my inventory. You used to be able to carry them on your back and transport anything you wanted that way. Well, when I couldn't figure out how to do that, I decided to just let it float free in space and push it. Later, I did the exact same thing with a beam. I brought 8 beams with me, with the idea being that I would stick the beams on the outside and I'd use them like towers, and I'd attach lights to the end of the beams and point the lights down at the various areas that needed illumination. And that would light up everything, but I couldn't get the beams to move either, and so I just let one of the beams float free, and I gave that a good pushing, trying to get it to the back. Now, when I did it with the light actually sort of just disappeared into the background. I wasn't sure where it had gone to, and that's when I went and I tried it with the beam. The beam was easier to see, and I got the beam into the back. I did manage to get one of the lights. I lost one of them. It's floating out there somewhere. I grabbed another light, and I got that one to the back by pushing it, and managed to get it attached, but between the frame rate and the inability to use the attachment system and everything, ultimately, I kind of had to give up on putting lights all over the place. But at least we have the module that will be able to control all the rest of the lights that were already on there, and I made sure that everything was all lit up. It turned out that some of the lights were on and some of the lights were off, and when you hit the light toggle, that toggles all the ons off and the offs on, and so I had to go around and by hand make sure that they were all at the same state so that toggling would turn them either all back off or all back on. So it wasn't a complete failure. I managed to fix up the lights and I attached a light, and there are more lights there, and so that if in the future I needed to come back and actually do some of that work, they'd be there for me. Or if somebody else in the future wants to grab some lights, well, they have some there. And let's not forget Bob, whatever, down on the surface, working in the light factory, producing more so that we can bring them up in the future. And so that's going to do it. I'll leave you with a last look at this station here, while I did a little exploring of my own, and then we do a little flyby. It's time for me to pass this off to the next person in the list to do their module. So until next time, I will see you later, Kerbinauts.